The Gospels, those are the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, offer 4 accounts of Jesus' time on earth. What's noteworthy is that each of these books seem to be written in complete independence of one another.
What? No, bitch. They were definitely not written independently. No. Today, we are going to be taking a look at a somewhat new channel called Faith Q&A, and they are producing 4 videos. The main person that's making all of the content, I guess, is Kate Palazzi. She is going to be making the case that the Bible is accurate. As you all know, I find that opinion to be shit. So we're going to go through her video tonight. I'm going to explain why she's wrong on just about everything in the video, and we're going to have a good time doing it. Are you guys ready to get started? You're ready, honey? Good. What's up, heathens? Today's video is brought to you by Ridge Wallets. Are y'all tired of carrying around big, thick wallets like this? Or how about you ladies? You tired of carrying around a big, giant, honking guy like this right here? Well, say no more. Get rid of those big, thick guys, and why don't you pick up a Ridge Wallet? Well, heathens, I gotta say, I love this Ridge Wallet. For one thing, it's got a small profile, but even though it has a small profile, it still holds up to 12 cards. See, you just pop the cards out right there, and then you can use it to buy your liquor. Oh, and another thing, it comes in about 30 colors, including carbon fiber and burnt titanium. So, if you'd like 10% off your order at ridge.com, be sure to use the link below, or just go to ridge.com/Godless Engineer. Oh, and I forgot, it's got a cash clip in the back, so you can just quickly pull that shit out of there. And you too can have the most awesome wallet that you have ever had in your life. And you can finally get rid of this bulky motherfucker right here. Go with Ridge today. Ridge.com, Godless Engineer.
Is the Bible accurate? How can we know? In the last 2 episodes, we looked at the unbelievably precise measurements of our planet for life, and then the likelihood of a cell being created on accident. We also explored 3 simple arguments against Darwinism. I think we can all agree that our planet and the fact that we even exist is astounding. But maybe you still aren't convinced that that necessarily means we have a creator who has purposefully designed us in our world.
Everything that she said that was totally ridiculous. Obviously, she hasn't disproven Darwinism. Obviously, she hasn't shown that life needs a creator. There's no argument out there that seriously establishes that God is needed for life to exist.
I really want to tell you that you are not an accident. You are not the result of cells bumping together randomly. You were designed on purpose by a God who adores you.
There's a fundamental flaw with her saying that, because basically she's telling children and people with cancer that God designed them to get cancer. Honestly, I feel like that kind of makes you an asshole if you purposefully designed somebody to have cancer. That literally makes you an asshole. You're also admitting that people are created by this God. Their life is planned out by this God, and God knows what they're going to do in their life, right? Well, then God knows about all the bad shit that person's going to do. God knew well beforehand that Hitler was going to be a really big dick. He knew well beforehand. He still let it happen. If I sit there and I watch somebody murder another person and I do nothing to try to stop them, does that make me a bad person? I don't know. You could see it as me being a bad person. Here's the big difference. If you have the capability to stop the person that is murdering another person and you don't stop the person, I think that kind of makes you a dick. I think that makes you a bad person, because if you have the means to stop them, you know that you could stop them if you wanted to, but you don't. That's a problem. And that's the exact position that God finds him in, especially when he's given this all-powerful creator of the universe kind of title.
Let's keep building on these findings and move on to the most important controversial book of all time, the Bible. By a vast measure, the Bible is the most printed book of all time. When I looked up the top 10 printed books, none of the lists were the same, of course. They each recorded different books in different orders, but there were 2 things the same in every single list. Number 1, the Bible was always listed at the top with numbers in the billions. Number 2, The second book in every list, though they were all of course varied, are each numbered in the millions. The Bible has been printed and circulated at least 6 times more than any other book in history.
So, this says nothing about whether or not it's true. I'm sure Harry Potter has been printed millions of times over. Not as much as the Bible, but then again, Harry Potter isn't worshipped as a major religion that has had its reign, had its hands on society for hundreds of years. Christianity has had enough time to generate that much literature. This literally has nothing to do with whether or not it's accurate or with whether or not anything in it is true. You're just using big numbers to try to suggest to your audience that the Bible's true because it's been printed a lot. I feel like that's what you're trying to suggest here.
The Bible is the most printed book.
Yeah.
3.9 billion copies sold over the last 50 years. Quotations from the works of Mao Zedong came in second with 820 million copies sold, and Harry Potter in third with 400 million copies.
400 million copies. See?
But the Bible has 3.9 billion in the last 50 years. Harry Potter hasn't been around for 50 years, so.
Right.
We'll see how it goes.
Why? It has been imperative for me to research the Bible and its integrity. If I'm going to live my life and follow it, then I need to know that it's true. So let's go over some questions. Is the Bible true? One factor that sets the Bible apart from any other world religious writing is that its remarkable consistency.
I'm sorry. The consistency of the Bible? No, the Bible is not consistent. It jumps all over the place. There's contradictions in the Old Testament. There's contradictions in the New Testament. Like, I don't know what in the fuck you mean by consistency. Here's consistency for you. Let's go directly to the Gospels because that's what Christians normally just like to go directly into, right? In the Gospels, you have 2 completely different birth stories for their Savior. Neither of them happened, of course, but there's 2 different ones. How can you say it's consistent when you have 2 different origin stories? It would be just as ridiculous to say that the Guardians of the Galaxy story arc is consistent with the original story arc of Guardians of the Galaxy. If you don't know about like the 2, they are pretty different. They kind of updated the story arc and everything like that. My point is that the origin stories and the story arc of both of them are radically different. And that's the same thing as with the Bible here, except they are more different. I mean, they have basic plot lines and everything like that, but when you actually look at the details, they're not consistent at all. This extends all throughout the Bible. None of it is consistent. I'm gonna need some fucking citations.
The Bible is composed of 66 books written by 40 authors in 3 languages, in 3 continents, over 1,500 years. And yet its themes and story remain unified.
No, they don't. Themes, maybe. Not even themes, because like in Mark, you have the least shall be first theme that's very prominent. And then the other gospel authors wrote in different ways to teach different things. You're just completely and utterly wrong. But also, it doesn't matter how much it's been copied. Up until the printing press was invented, it was hard to get a consistent Bible between 2 different copies. These were minor things that got changed, most of them, but there were some very, very big ones that did get changed. But this is how we can track exactly how different the Bible is, like how different authors rewrote the Bible. We can track the changes. But once people started getting literate or becoming literate and the printing press was invented, at that point, you had a more standardized Bible. But before that point, there was nothing whatsoever consistent about any one Bible. As far as comparing one Bible to another Bible, definitely not consistent. So I don't even know why you're fucking bringing up 1,500 years of copying all these different books and shit. Like, it just really doesn't matter.
It was written by farmers and shepherds and kings, prophets, tax collectors, all who agree on the 2 subjects notorious for war and discord. You know them, religion and politics. How could all 66 books written in prisons, palaces, wilderness deliver one message? It's the same message.
Are you literally saying it's amazing? They copied shit down. These people, they had these religious traditions of copying the books, right? And I know a lot of apologists like to put a lot of stock in how they copied texts. But I mean, it wasn't just the religious. This was like the ancient art of the scribe and whatnot, of copying books down and everything like that. I mean, that was developed outside of Judaism and Christianity. I mean, to be in awe over the fact that they could copy words from one page to another page is pretty fucking sad. I don't understand how this plays into the Bible being accurate, other than you're trying to say that it's been accurately copied down and translated and propagated through time. But you're not critically taking a look at how the Bible has changed over those centuries, and the fact that prior to 300 AD, which is the earliest date for our oldest copy of the Bible, our oldest codex, we don't know about anything that got changed prior to that point. We do have fragments of like the Gospels and everything like that, but we really don't know if the Bible that we have now is the same Bible that was generated in the first century, in the second century. We do know it's not that, but we don't know what the exact contents were of the original text, but we don't know how different it is. That's right.
The message of God's eternal plan and how he will save his people. Can I get a witness? The Gospels were written in a time when other eyewitnesses were still alive.
No, they weren't. Mark was written after 70 AD. Matthew was written after 80 AD. Luke was written after 93 AD. Even at 70 AD, that's pushing it really, really hard to have eyewitnesses around. I don't see peasant people being able to live until their 80s or 90s or what in the fuck ever in the first century. So like when she's talking about eyewitnesses, she's talking about people, the disciples age, which the disciples age would have been like either mid 20s to early 30s in the first century, which was when Jesus was crucified. And so you're talking 40 years after that. You're talking between 70 and 90 as far as when the Gospels were written. There were no eyewitnesses to this. In fact, just to drive it home with you, none of the Gospels mention eyewitnesses. They don't mention anybody as a source that was an eyewitness. The only sources that they draw from are scriptures. So they don't even attempt to tie themselves to an earthly source other than God's word.
In fact, there were at least 300 eyewitnesses of the resurrection still alive when 1 Corinthians was written. You can find that in 1 Corinthians 15, 3-8.
Now, this is the Pauline Creed, where it mentions about how Christ died for our sins. According to the scriptures, he was buried, he raised according to the scriptures. And then it goes into a list of people that saw Jesus after he resurrected from the dead. Paul never mentions anybody that saw Jesus prior to his death. Paul never talks about Jesus being born. Paul never talks about anything but after Jesus has supposedly resurrected from the dead. In this portion that she's talking about the 500 witnesses that were there that saw Jesus resurrect from the dead. Let me ask you this. If I were to tell you that 500 people saw Aerosmith play in Huntsville, Alabama, but there's no video recording of it, there's no evidence whatsoever other than these 500 witnesses, could you then go and find who those 500 witnesses were? If I just tell you that there's 500 people that saw this motherfucker sing, Steve Tyler, could you go and find like somebody that went there? What's the population of Huntsville? We got 196,000 people in 2019 that lives in Huntsville, Alabama. Out of 196,000 people that live here, could you go find 500? Now, even if you were to translate that to people that were in Judea at the time, or people that were in that area of the world, you're still talking about a huge number of people, and you're tasked with finding just those 500. My point is that just saying 500 people saw Jesus resurrect from the dead does not actually prove that 500 people saw him resurrected from the dead as some magical celestial ghost.
Writings would quickly be disregarded if false testimony was given with so many witnesses still present. The Gospels, those are the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
I'm sorry, she just talked about how it's really hard for them to put out these Gospels when there's so many people that saw something happen. What year do you live in? Is it like 2015 or something? Because we just went through 4 years of hell of misinformation. People have printed and said things that are verifiably false. You can literally rub their noses in how wrong they are, like a dog that shit on your carpet. But they still put it out there. They still believe it. There are literally right now people that believe that Trump is going to get back into the Oval Office. How can you say that people wouldn't have written lies about something or wouldn't have made something up or wouldn't have just bullshitted their way through it if there were so many witnesses? Everybody witnessed the insurrection rally, but people are going to deny that the MAGA people were the insurrectionists. They're going to say it was Antifa. It just blows my mind how you think that just because 500 people saw it means that they wouldn't have written lies about it.
Offer 4 accounts of Jesus' time on earth. What's noteworthy is that each of these books seem to be written in complete independence of one another.
What? No, bitch. They were definitely not written independently. No. Basically, and this is going to be kind of a summary of the current consensus in the scholarship, right, about this. This would include biblical scholars that are religious and non-religious. Just everybody agrees. Mark was the first gospel and actually the only independent gospel. Matthew copied from Mark. Luke copied from both Mark and Matthew. And then John copied from all 3 of them motherfuckers. So really, out of the 4 gospels, you have one gospel message. That's the only one. The rest of them were copies off of Mark that changed shit and pushed different things because they wanted to teach different things. All you have is Mark. That's the original gospel. That's the one that was written first. Deal with it.
They speak from various points of view, and it's just not what you expect to find from 4 different accounts. Like, if you and I were going to do a coordinated collaboration and we wanted it to be believable, but it's still a made-up story, wouldn't we sit down and go over exactly what we would say to ensure that it was consistent? It's just not what we find in the Gospels.
How is that not what we find in the Gospels? True, the people that literally wrote the Gospels did not sit down with each other and try to figure out how to make this shit work. One person wrote it in the 70s, Mark, and then 10 years later, you have another fuck who got a hold of Mark's Gospel and was like, this is bullshit. I hate every fucking thing in this motherfucker. I'm going to change it. I'm going to make Jesus more magical. He's going to do magical shit, and that's going to be the end of it. That's how it happened. I know it. And then you got Luke, and after 93 AD, that was like, hey, those 2 motherfuckers are wrong. The story was much longer. And so he ended up writing Acts as well as his own personal version of the gospel message. And then you got John, who's like, all these motherfuckers weren't smoking the right weed. Oh, God, come, let's do this. And then he wrote his own gospel that refutes all of the other gospels because they were fucking delirious. He's got the right gospel, the Republican Jesus that don't give a fuck about y'all.
Some mention details that others leave out. One might tell the first part of the story, and the other might tell the second, and it all depends on the author's point of emphasis. It's what would happen if each of us just told the same story naturally.
No, it's not. Let's just take the finding the empty tomb. Mark has just one young man dressed in a white robe that's sitting in the tomb and tells them, don't be alarmed. You're looking for Jesus, but he's risen. He's not here. Go ahead into Galilee. There you will see him just as he told you. But then Jesus appears to him and says, hey, don't tell nobody, bitches, okay? Snitches get stitches, bitches. And then you've got Matthew, who's fucking comes in with an angel who fucking field goals the cover stone away and like lightning and everything, and is like, Jesus ain't here no more, bitches. Go tell everybody, motherfuckers. And then fucking flies away like a goddamn pterodactyl. And then Luke just has 2 naked boys inside the tomb that probably got molested by Jesus. They're just like, he ain't here no more. And so they left. And then John, she just found the tomb empty. No, they're not consistent. Not just like us telling stories. If you were to compare this to us just telling the same story, like at a crime scene or wherever in the fuck J. Warner Wallace wants to envision, but if you want to envision it, one person would say, oh, dude over there just conjured a pistol in his hand and then shot the other dude. The next guy says, oh, well, you're not going to believe this shit, officer. So basically an angel came down like a fucking pterodactyl and dropped off a semi-automatic machine gun to the dude. And then he picked it up like fucking Rambo and went and just obliterated the guy. Luke would be like, listen, these 2 strange as fuck, like the shining looking little bitches came up, gave the dude 2 guns, and then he just blasted the motherfucker to hell. And then the John's gospel would just be like, yo, I just walked up, he had a gun, the dude was dead. I mean, these are radically different, right? These are radically different stories.
So Matthew is speaking to a Jewish audience, and he wants to convey Jesus as the king and predicted deliverer. Luke gives us a history lesson and shows Jesus's human side. John's focus is evangelism. Mark stresses Jesus as a servant who suffers for the good of others. Together, they give us a fuller picture.
None of that is true. Each gospel redacted Mark's gospel and the previous gospels in order to tell the stories that they wanted. Now, she said that Luke told it from a historical perspective, when in fact, Luke took his influences from like Josephus, from Odysseus, Odyssey, rather. I mean, he took his influence from all of these other different historical scholars at the time, historians, to act like these people were just telling the same story in different ways is really fucking ridiculous when you actually consider the differences between the different stories. Well, yeah, so Casey brought up a good point. In case you didn't hear, how similar they are even in words, because there are verbatim copies of Mark in both Matthew and Luke. You also have to consider the verbatim copies of words.
Let's talk about the misfit heroes of the Bible. Now, if I were going to write the Bible, I might have conveniently left out that Moses committed murder, or that David killed a man because David got his wife pregnant, or maybe that Paul relentlessly persecuted Christians. But these and hundreds of other sins and details and stories did not get left out. There they sit in print for us to read thousands of years later.
Yes, for a purpose. That purpose being showing that humanity is flawed, humanity is fucked up. God is perfect. You need God because you're fucked up. You make bad decisions. You're a dumbass. Suck God dick. That's the reason why it's in there. That's the reason why in the Gospels, the disciples are dipshits. They were representation of the 12 tribes of Israel. They were dumbasses. They didn't get Jesus' message because they're dumbasses and dipshits, and that's what the Bible wanted to tell you, is that humanity, God's chosen people, are dumb as fuck. That is the point it was trying to drive home. The original authors wanted to make the people that would believe in this feel like dumbasses. Why would they leave out a crucial point in what they were trying to teach people? This is basically the embarrassment criteria, which is primarily only used in biblical studies, by the way. They literally have to use their own special criteria in order to prove their points. That should set off a red flag in the old cranium there. Embarrassment criteria is the weakest kind of evidence that you could ever provide for establishing anything as truthful or as actually happening in history.
Why? Instead of only representing one side perfectionism, these misfit heroes of the Bible can give us hope for our own lives. We are not perfect, we do terrible things as well, but God can still use us as He used them. Prophecy is another topic to consider. There are 1,239 prophecies in the Old Testament and 578 prophecies in the New Testament. That's according to J. Barton Payne's Encyclopedia of Biblical Prophecy Lists. That's a total of 1,817 biblical prophecies, many of which have been fulfilled. No other book has dared be so laden with telling the future?
I'm sorry, Miss Cleo has a problem with you. Nostradamus is in the hall looking to kick your ass. For one thing, the prophecies in the Bible are shit. If I were to say, like, something that I could get out of just general informed guessing, if you know a bit of information, you can see the signs coming, boom, there's going to be a war with Israel, or there's going to be a Jewish war. You could predict it like years out and say, hey, this is coming, and then you'll look like a prophet. But also, most, if not all of these prophecies never actually came to pass. Like the prophecy of Tyre, that never actually got fulfilled. None of the Old Testament prophecies about Jesus got fulfilled. Well, they got fulfilled in the sense that later writers looked back and were trying to discern what Jesus was supposed to do when he's here, or like miracles he was supposed to do. They definitely looked at the Old Testament for prophecies about what he's supposed to do, especially the Elisha narratives and other prophets that existed in the Old Testament, the miracles that they did. They mined those for the things that Jesus was supposed to do. What you're suggesting is just fucking ridiculous with the prophecies, because none of them were fulfilled for Jesus. They fulfilled prophecies just like Harry Potter. All of the books after the first book fulfilled what the first book was sort of foreshadowing for the end of the series. There was foreshadowing all throughout the Harry Potter series. You see this in other longer series too, where they foreshadow what is to happen at the end, because they've already got the end planned out. It's the exact same thing with the Bible, except the Old Testament writers didn't have it planned out for the end, so the New Testament writers looked back at the Old Testament writers and guessed at what the end was supposed to look like.
But what about the harder to believe stories? I've heard people say something like, yeah, I believe the Bible, except for Jonah being swallowed by a fish and living. That's too much. Well, why it wouldn't be Jesus rising from the dead, or even the whole earth flooding? I'm just not sure. But it's important to say that God is not constrained by the natural laws he created. And honestly, I don't think that humans would be happy with or without the miracles.
Oh, how convenient for him. Oh, how convenient for God that he's not bound by the natural laws that he created, because he exists outside of this reality. So he's magical as shit. He can do anything that he wants to. But in the olden times, in the Old Testament and the New Testament, God did magical shit. He broke the laws of nature just anytime he wanted to. He was reckless. He was like a drunk teenager with a car and a fake license, and his father worked for the police. His father was captain of the police. He could get away with fucking murder, and he was just like all willy-nilly and everything, fucking all over the world. But then I don't know what changed, but all of a sudden God got less and less magical, because nowadays he just helps women like this and other privileged people get what they want out of life, either money, finding your keys, getting that A, whatever in the fuck, and that's what he does. He doesn't do anything magical now, but he's not bound by the laws of reality. He's not bound by natural laws. Oh, well, then why doesn't he make it like snow in, I don't know, someplace where it never fucking snows? I don't know where that is. It's just very odd how God just abruptly stopped doing magical things. But of course, he's not bound by the laws of nature.
For example, if he had never done anything supernatural outside the laws of physics, we would question if he was really there or if he was truly powerful. Yet when he does them, we say, nah, I can't believe that could ever happen. Do you see what I'm saying? So that said, I admit to still being curious about some of these specific stories, and I can't go into those details now, but I would recommend that you check out answersingenesis.org or gotquestions.com for things like, could Jonah survive being swallowed by a fish? Was there really a Noah's Ark and flood? What about dinosaurs?
No. We have to hit on the fact that you actually quoted or cited Answers in Genesis and GotQuestions.org. What the fuck?
Okay, next question. Has the Bible been altered? The Bible is not a translation of translations. It was written in Greek, Aramaic, and Hebrew, which people still speak today.
Yes, but I want to emphasize this. Unless you speak Aramaic, Greek, and Hebrew, you're reading a translation! It is a translation of translations, because it gets translated from one language to another. If you read it in English, you're reading a translation.
No one questions whether we have the original words of Plato, but there are only 7 ancient copies, and the oldest are separated from the original by 1,200 years.
To put this in perspective here, Plato is much, much, much older than the Bible. Plato's writings were not regarded as divine word as was what was written in the Bible. It makes sense that his works would only be scantily preserved. Now, she did word it very specifically because she said ancient works. So we have 7 ancient works. I think she's talking about 7 ancient original as can be, copies of Plato's works. And that's probably true, but we have 250 actual copies of his work that are not like modern copies. They're older copies. To compare Plato to the Bible, it's just a bad analogy. Like you're comparing 2 different things here.
Socrates has no surviving manuscripts, and the closest printed ancient copies to the Bible is Homer's Iliad with 643 copies within 500 years of the original.
It really doesn't matter how many copies there are of like Socrates or Aristotle, Homer, Plato. Like it doesn't really matter about all those things because just because the Bible was copied more, because it's still a very central thing in our society, that does not mean anything about whether or not it's true. Harry Potter could be copied for hundreds of years, thousands of years even, and that still wouldn't make it true. It could have billions upon billions of copies of it. It is still not reality. It is still fantasy.
By enormous contrast, there are more than 5,600 copies of the New Testament within 100 years of the original.
I don't see how she can know that. I don't know what they're counting as copies, because the way that she's saying it is like we have all of these things from the original. We don't have the original. We have fragments of early copies. We don't have the original. So there's no way that we could have 560 copies of the original, because we don't know what the original was in order to compare them to the copies that we do have. Now, we probably do have 560 copies from about 300 AD onward, but that's not 100 years after the originals were written. Paul was writing in the 50s, so 100 years after that would have been 150. That's the middle of the 2nd century. That is actually when the separate parts of the Bible were compiled together into what we would know as the modern Bible.
Let's talk about the Dead Sea Scrolls. In the 1940s, a shepherd boy found what are now known as the Dead Sea Scrolls in the Qumran caves in Israel. The Dead Sea Scrolls contain the oldest copies of scripture ever found, even as early as 4th century BC. Secular archaeologists also confirmed their validity. Fragments of the book of Isaiah were recovered, which was written hundreds of years before Christ, and not a word had been altered. It is safe to say that the Bible has the same words today that it's had throughout the centuries.
Just because a book is copied accurately, regardless of whether it was a human copying it or a machine producing copies of it, that says nothing about whether or not what's printed or copied is accurate and really happened in history. That has literally nothing to do with accuracy of the Bible. It has something to do with the accuracy of copying the Bible in the Jewish culture and in the Christian culture, but it has nothing to do with whether or not the Bible is accurate and correct in history.
The accuracy of the words are also reliable. So next question, does archaeology support the Bible? The Bible is not a collection of cleverly invented stories, according to 2 Peter 1:16. It is full of names, people, places, stories that can be verified. Thousands of ancient writings from hundreds of sites have been excavated, confirming the Bible's accuracy. Of course, not all archaeologists agree on dates and interpretation. Cutting technology changes previously set datings, and new artifacts suddenly bring people into existence. But it is compelling and worth investigating on our journey of proof.
I agree. Archaeology and what archaeology can tell us is important as to what actually happened in reality. Archaeology, when taken honestly, can tell us whether or not the Bible is accurate in its history. I would love for you to provide fucking citations for how archaeology supports the Bible. Because as I've found, archaeology does not support the Bible, other than establishing that certain people and places existed in history, which do not prove that the events surrounding those people and places actually happened. Right. Harry Potter uses London. Because the UK exists, that means Harry Potter's real. Or New York means that Spider-Man is a true story. It doesn't mean that, but that is akin to what she's saying here.
Here are just a very few select archaeological findings that support the Bible. Many ancient cities such as Babylon, Beersheba, they're mentioned in the Old Testament, have been located and date back to coordinating times in the Bible. There's also proof of the Hittite population. These were enemies of the Israelites that didn't exist until the 19th century. What is believed to be the city of Sodom was discovered and appeared to be abandoned suddenly, as stated in Genesis 19.
Okay, so there's a few things to clarify here. For one thing, with the Sodom deal, there's been a place that's been discovered in the general area where biblical scholars think that Sodom would have existed that was hit by an asteroid. This is found in a Forbes article that discusses a recent scientific discovery, but not scientific, archaeological, with one caveat: the archaeologist is actually Philip J. Sylvia of, and see if you can guess this, Trinity Southwest University. Do you know what Trinity Southwest University is? Ding, ding, ding. If you guessed a Christian unaccredited university, you would be correct. So it's an unaccredited Christian doctrinal university that's produced this archaeologist, which he's from there. I don't know if he got his archaeology degree from there, but he apparently teaches at the university, and he's an archaeologist, and he's established that this is Sodom, when in reality they don't know that it is Sodom. They haven't actually shown that it's Sodom. Like, they haven't found street signs that say Whore Street Sodom or something like that. They haven't found that. All they found is a city that once existed in this one place. It seems to have been hit by an asteroid or a giant meteorite. So they just flat out say, oh, this must be Sodom, because it checks off all of the fire and brimstone and destruction type thing of Sodom. They have a name for it. Tal el Hammam is the city name. The Forbes article that I have concludes that if Tel el Hammam is Sodom and it was destroyed by a cosmic airburst, the biggest question remains: did somebody, perhaps a deity, order the asteroid hit on Sodom? She's just automatically assuming, and so is this archaeologist, automatically assuming that this is Sodom. But it just seems to me like the Sodom and Gomorrah story is bullshit that's meant to teach some kind of lesson to the Israelites. That you gotta obey God and not want to gay fuck his angels, and also be opening to people to your home in order to not get destroyed by God. That's what it seems to tell me.
Jericho excavations show that it was violently destroyed, as the account details in Joshua 6. King David's palace was recovered. Herod the Great's palace was also found, where Jesus was tried.
Okay, so for Jericho, there has been archaeological evidence of Jericho existing, but it's got a caveat. It's got a little mark on it, right? The wall that surrounded Jericho collapsed or was destroyed by an earthquake in the late 17th century and early 16th century BCE. So right around that, straddling that line right there, the walls of Jericho were destroyed. Now, the problem is that in the Bible, around 1400 BCE, Jericho was attacked by the Israelites by them marching around the city 7 times, blowing their horns and having a hissy fit. God destroyed the walls of Jericho and they invaded. Now, why is this an issue? Well, for one thing, the walls were destroyed late 17th to early 16th century BCE. Another problem is that from the late 15th century BCE to the 10th century BCE, the city was uninhabited. So the 15th century BCE starts in 1500 and runs down to 1400. So about 100 years prior to when the Israelites supposedly knocked down the walls of Jericho, Jericho was deserted. So if you want to imagine it, the Israelites Israelites are surrounding the city, this empty city, and then they storm an empty city. I don't know if they were doing this for practice or what, but it was empty. So there's no way that the biblical version of the Israelites taking on Jericho actually happened.
Stone tablets have been recovered proving that Pontius Pilate existed, which had been up for debate. The Bible lists detailed genealogies in Genesis, Numbers, Chronicles, Ezra, Matthew, and Luke. These confirm prophecy that Jesus was from the line of David and reinforce scriptural accuracy and historic timelines.
Wait. Which genealogy? Is it the Matthew genealogy that establishes all this bullshit? Or is it the Luke genealogy that establishes all this bullshit? Because they're both different. They're both not consistent with each other. Which one establishes this? Because I feel like you saying all of this bullshit means that it somehow confirms that it's reality or that it happened in history. It didn't.
The Bible is worth your attention on an academic level and a personal level. At least consider spending some time in the most printed book ever written, the one that shaped humanity more than any other. I'd like to end today with a quote from Clifford Wilson. However, it is remarkable that where confirmation is possible and has come to light, the Bible survives careful investigation in ways that are unique in all literature. Its superiority to attack, its capacity to withstand criticism, and its amazing facility to be proved right are all staggering by any standards of scholarship. Seemingly assured results have been disproving the Bible have a habit of backfiring.
What? What the fuck? No. So its superiority to attack, being the Bible's superiority to attack, its capacity to withstand criticism. Are you fucking serious? You're gonna end with this particular quote because it cannot withstand criticism. It is not superior to attack. This entire quote right here reeks of just creationist bullshit. Unapologetic apologetics. It's just so horrible, this final quote, because nothing is true within this quote. All that you find within this quote right here is just blind faith biased bullshit from somebody that has deep-throated Jesus's dick. That's all that you find in this quote. Only thing. So sad.
I hope you'll tune in next week when we ask, can we know if Jesus is the Son of God?
I just find it so fucking hilarious, that these people think that they've got some kind of fucking gotcha for not just atheists, but just anybody that takes a critical look at the Bible and things that are said in the Bible. It amazes me how ridiculously clueless these people are, because all they do is they regurgitate things they've heard from like J. Warner Wallace, Lee Strobel, William Lane Craig, these basic ass apologists for the faith. They just regurgitate and repeat what they hear from these people, and they don't come up with anything new. They just baselessly claim these things, and they don't have any evidence behind them. How are you supposed to convince somebody that doesn't already believe in your bullshit that your bullshit is real? I feel like you got to look past the apologetics on this. You have to look at the actual evidence. Why is it evidence? Why does it mean that the Bible is accurate? Why does it mean that Jesus even existed in history? Why does it mean that the gospel message is fucking consistent? It's not fucking consistent, but they want to act like it is. It's just, it really grinds my fucking gears. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on how dumb as shit the Bible and its consistency is. I really appreciate you guys being here. Don't forget to stand up, use your voice, and all that kind of good shit. Smash the like button. Subscribe if you like this kind of live stream. And I will see you heathens later.